Welcome to the All Out Leadership Podcast, hosted by Pastor Eric Lawson, where each episode is uniquely designed to help you live all out by bringing you practical leadership from a biblical perspective delivered in 10 minutes or less. So whether you're a business leader, serving in ministry, or simply looking to grow in your leadership, this podcast is for you. Before we dive into this week's topic, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and download the show notes at ericlawson.com/podcast. And while you're at it, feel free to share the content on social media. Now, let's join Pastor Eric for this week's conversation.
Welcome to another edition of the All Out Leadership Podcast. When I say the name Henry Ford, what comes to mind? Probably things like a car, Ford car. Thomas Edison, what comes to mind? Probably things like a light bulb or other inventions. Mother Teresa, taking care of lepers in Calcutta and all the great works that she did to help people. Ben Franklin, what comes to mind? Probably you need another $100 bill. That's what comes to my mind. But when you think of Ben Franklin, you think of lightning rod, Franklin stove, the library system as we know it today, post office, volunteer fire department, and so forth. And the list goes on when you think of Ben Franklin. Why do we remember these names? Chances are we remember their name because they did something. Today, we're going to jump back into the life of David, and we're going to be learning the powerful principle of a name that's memorable. And we see 2 Samuel chapter 8 and verse 13. David made himself a name when he returned from killing 18,000 Syrians in the Valley of Salt. David made a name because he got results. Every name that we just mentioned, Henry Ford, Mother Teresa, Ben Franklin, you remember them because they got results. They produced something. They did something for their life. They're remembered for what they did more than remembered for what they said. There are too many people who are trying to create a name and they think, well, I need the right marketing technique and, I need to, get an account and I got to do all these things to get, name brand and name recognition. And it's not that those are necessarily wrong. They're not. It's just if that's what you're relying on to create a name and get a name, you're really kind of doing it backwards. David got a name because he produced results. He went into a valley called the Valley of Salt, which is another term for a valley of pits. So pits, salt pits. So basically there was a valley, which is always a low point, and then there were a bunch of pits, salt pits, and those aren't good places. Nobody wants to be down in the pit. Nobody wants to be down in where it's salty. Nobody wants to be down in a valley. And you know what David did? He went down and killed a bunch of enemies where nobody else wanted to go. And what did he do? He produced a name because he produced results. Look, you want to be remembered? It's really simple. Start producing more results. You want a name that your boss recognizes? You want to be promoted inside of your company? You want a name inside of your community? Get results. I'm going to talk about 2 ways not to build a name because I think this is very common. And so let me just talk about 2 ways. Number 1, all talk, no walk. That is a terrible way to build a name. Now, you might build a name initially because you can talk yourself up to, man, I'm great, and I did this, and I did that, and woo, I know this, and I have this degree, and yeah. And somebody might be impressed with you initially, but over time, what they're going to watch is, can you actually walk it? Can you produce it? I've had staff over the years, and they sounded really good. I'd be listening to them in a staff meeting and we'd be, going over reports and things and they could talk and I was like, oh, wow, that's amazing. But then when I went and actually looked at the results or I went and actually talked to the people that they were leading, I realized they were really good in a room talking, but they weren't producing the results that they were saying that they were producing. The walk didn't match the talk. They were just really good at talking. And ultimately what happens is over time, they lose influence with the people they're leading. They lose their influence with me because it's just talk and no walk. Then there's other staff. They're honestly very not impressive when it comes to like their, maybe outgoing personality. They're not very charismatic and dynamic, and they don't light up the room when they walk in. But you know what? They just produce results. They're consistent. They're consistent day in, day out, year over year, and they get it done. Over time, maybe they're not that impressive from a personality point of view. Long term, though, they carry greater influence and a greater name among our staff or among our church or among their peers because they get results. Look, at the end of the day, if you want a great name, you may be a great talker, but you better be a better walker than you are a talker and get results. That's what David did. The second wrong way to build a name is what I call piggybacking. There's a lot of people who build a name by piggybacking on somebody else's name. We know them as the name droppers. They got to tell everybody that they know and who I was with. And social media has done a great job with this. People really just use social media as a way to kind of, ooh, look who I'm with. I'm with so-and-so. And we may not even word it that way, but we love to drop selfies. I had this one staff member years ago. Good man, godly man, love him. Jesus loves him. But look, all of us are wounded somewhere, okay? We all have issues, and we're all a work in progress, and we're all trophies of God's grace. Well, one area that this gentleman would struggle with is he was the guy who had to get a selfie with anybody that we went and met that was famous or influential. They would go get a selfie, and then in 3 minutes, it was posted on their social media like, look. And you know what, man, I didn't even go get pictures with these guys. I could have. Actually, the reason that guy was in the room was because of me, because I was the one invited into the room to be with that person, and they just piggybacked on my influence. Then they piggybacked on that person's name to build their reputation on social media. And I go, why? I mean, look, if you're counting on feeling like you're somebody because you know somebody that is somebody, you might not be the somebody that you think you are or trying to project that you are. Don't piggyback on somebody else's name to build your own. And I'm just not a name dropper, and it's just, I feel very uncomfortable around people that do. I was years ago, about 20 years ago, I was at a conference that I was invited to, actually as a keynote speaker in El Paso, Texas. And at that time I was in youth ministry. I had the largest youth ministry in the country under the leadership of a great pastor, Willie George. And so a lot of the results there are attributed to what he did as the senior pastor. I was there and others just to support that vision, so I can't take all the credit by any means. But I was there as a keynote speaker, and I was talking on youth ministry at this pretty good-sized national conference. So there's this green room experience where they got a bunch of dinner tables out, and, they have, quote, important people or leaders in the body of Christ or whatever, in there. And I'm sitting there at the table, and there's this kid, he's like 20, 21, and he's going around the whole room passing out his business card. So he gets to me, and he introduces himself, and he just spends 5 minutes talking about everybody he knows. And I know this person, I know that person, and I preach to 50,000 people over here and over there in some country I never heard of. And so I'm like, hey, that's great, man. God bless you. Thanks for all that you're doing. Keep up the great work. And then he left me and he went on to the next table. And my heart really just went out to this young man because I could just feel that he was really insecure, and he was just trying to find a sense of validation, a sense of, hey, I am valuable. And, hey, look at me, look, Ma, no hands, thumbs up from Poppy. I don't know. But he was trying to get some sense of validation through all the names that he could drop. Now, 20 years later, I don't remember the kid's name, and I've never heard of the kid's name ever since. And I'm hoping he's doing well. I'm hoping, he's walking with God and God's using him in powerful ways. But, he didn't really gain anything by all the names that he dropped. But when I say the name Billy Graham, you all know that because he produced some results. Again, Mother Teresa produced results. The people that you remember in life are the ones who have some kind of impact in you, and they produced some kind of result in your life. Look, if you want to be memorable, if you want a name that's valuable in terms of people recognizing that and esteeming it, and that's not a bad thing to desire. In fact, Proverbs 22:1 says, a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches. It's just how you go about that. Look, if you'll go about being like Jesus, loving people, valuing people, touching people, putting people first, and getting results, you know what? You're going to create a great name, and people will remember you. All right, I got to end with this one thought. What I love about David is he also models an important way to keep a great name. If anybody had the right to go, hey, I won the Super Bowl and I'm good, would have been David, because as a teenager, he killed Goliath. And that is the most well-known story universally around the world, David killing Goliath. But he didn't stop there. Now, if anybody had a right to go, I'm good, hey, hey guys, y'all remember back when I killed Goliath? And he could have been that guy sitting around the dinner table. Hey, did I ever tell you about that one I killed Goliath? And you're like, yeah, we heard that one, Grandpa. It wasn't David. You know what he is? Yeah, he killed Goliath, but now he's out there in the Valley of Salt fighting another 18,000, killing another 18,000 of the enemy. When you look at the life of David, he was continually going on to the next battle, to the next conquest, to the next victory, not camping on yesterday's success. One of the greatest ways to lose the credibility of a name is to be the guy who's going around living off yesterday's success rather than getting up going, God, what giants do you want me to take on today? All right, so there you have some important lessons about making a great name in your family, a great name in your company, and in your community.
Thank you for joining us on the All Out Leadership Podcast. We hope you gained new biblical insight that challenged you to grow in your leadership. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we would love your help in getting the content out farther. You can help by subscribing to the podcast at eriklawson.com/podcast and telling others about it. Next week, Pastor Eric will be back with another episode. So until then, we hope you have a great week being an all-out leader.